You're good.
All right. My name is Nick Pickerel, and I've lived at Cherith Brook for the past 3 years, Cherith Brook Catholic Worker House. I never would have imagined myself being here, for one. Most of my life, I was imagining I was going to pursue music or youth ministry or do something like that, but I noticed that after I ended up pursuing music, I wasn't satisfied with that, and I pursued youth ministry, and again wasn't satisfied with that. I wanted something that was more holistic, like more something that actually cost me something with more of a purpose, that rather than me just entertaining kids at a youth camp or getting up on stage and performing for people and hope that they like it. So some of my coworkers knew about like my kind of struggle and this kind of inner turmoil that I was experiencing, and so this woman showed up at one of my colleagues at work, gave me a CD, and it was a sermon by this guy named Shane Claiborne, who has definitely been a catalyst for many. I appreciate the fact that he's an excellent voice box for this kind of thing, for pursuing something that requires all of you. And so I listened to this sermon, and it made my heart beat a little bit faster. They spoke about crazy stories of, you know, them all being in college and really wrestling with Christianity and thinking that just the Sunday service, there's got to be something more to it. And then they hear of homeless people down the street from their college, how they've taken over an abandoned Catholic parish, and they were getting ready to sweep in and kick all the homeless people out, and so they mobilized themselves and, you know, defended the homeless and ended up making it so that could be their place where they were living. They really set up, there was families living there, the whole shebang, and they just thought it was so wrong that the church, who's supposed to have open doors, were the ones that were kicking out the homeless when they're not even using it, but they still own it. And so so it was just story after story of that. The same guy went to India and you know, worked alongside Mother Teresa, and so it was just all these things. I was like, wow, okay, so now there's like a sense of adventure, a sense of like it actually cost, like my faith costing me something. There's a purpose there, and so I wanted to pursue that. So what I did was shortly after I had heard that sermon about a bazillion times, I decided I wanted to be more free to do what God wanted me to do, so I sold a bunch of stuff that I'd owned, and to try to release myself, and it did feel freeing. And then I decided, you know, I lived a pretty sheltered life. The only time I'd been out of the country was when I went to Australia, which is essentially, I mean, it's another Western country, and so for all intents and purposes, and so I wanted to experience poverty and be kind of confronted with things I'd never been confronted with before, and so I took my first ever trip overseas by myself, and I went to India, a place where I knew no one, didn't know the language. It was just me and a bunch of Indians in an orphanage in southern rural India. And so I was there for a month, and I took a few books along with me, one being Irresistible Revolution by Shane Claiborne. I brought Mother Teresa's memoirs, Come Be My Light, and a couple other books. And while I was there, this is like one of the only times in my life where I felt God was shouting at me louder and louder while I was there. So one was I started to experience more and more joy. Like I was reading the Mother Teresa book. The way my day was shaped is I was reading most of the morning and praying most of the morning, and then I went out and played with the kids, helped serve meals, helped with worship, and that was kind of the rhythm. And we did a bunch of oddball things off and on. But I experienced a deep amount of joy where my sarcasm went away, and it gave way to something very beautiful and very life-giving, and it was something where I just wanted to take part in this big joy ball that was kind of rolling around the orphanage. And that was something that I hadn't really experienced before, because I'm used to just being sarcastic and trying to be witty and trying to almost even like one-up the other in humor. And so that was very interesting, and experiencing the kind of community, the beautiful community that was there, and how people really cared for one another when I was in India, and the kind of interdependence that was present there. Then things started to shift. I experienced my own mortality. Like the day before I left to go on a little excursion around India, I experienced my first ever, it was the first time I'd ever seen someone die in front of me. So there was a horrible accident on a highway right outside the orphanage, and so we all ran out. I saw a baby getting taken away. It was all very chaotic. A baby was getting taken away, and I turned to my right, and there's this guy laying there. A big semi-truck had hit a person on a bicycle, a dad and son on a bicycle. And I watched the dad stop breathing right there, and that was the first time that I'd ever seen something like that, and it really messed me up because I was a sheltered suburban kid. And so then I was wrestling with just like, holy crap, now this kid is now fatherless. Like, this is horrible. How can this ever be allowed to happen? And I started to wrestle through this. I had this whirlwind of emotion, and eventually I came back to, realizing my own mortality, because I thought I was invincible, and now I'm seeing this. And they shortly after that I was taken to a Hindu temple, and I saw animals being sacrificed, and again, it was crazy to see that. And then again, it's just like seeing I took the mortality road with it, because I'd never seen people just like taking a machete and off goes a goat's head, and it's done. I'm like, oh my gosh. And so that thing was interesting, because I'd never seen any of that. But then I had met a priest on the way over, on the plane ride over, and he told me I should see parts of India, so I decided to trust him and go see parts of India, and it turned out to be great. And the first place he took me to was Madras, where Thomas was martyred, one of the 12. I had no idea that that's where he went, and I had no idea that that's where he was said to have been martyred. And so now all of a sudden, I experienced this joy that came from community. I'm reading these books on community. I experienced my own mortality, and now I'm seeing how people, even faced with their own mortality, still chose to follow their faith, and how it cost them their lives. So now I'm wrestling with Thomas doing something that cost him his life, literally cost him his life, and how he still pursued it to the end, and that was doubting Thomas. It's like, okay, I've got there's a chance here for me. And so we experienced that, and then the priest took me to this crazy community called Oroville, which is very New Agey, but it was a place where folks from 37 different countries all came, and they turned a bunch of red dirt into some of the most beautiful gardens I'd ever seen. They constructed an unbelievable prayer structure. It looked kind of like the Epcot Center. It was a big old ball. It took them 20, 30 years to construct it, because of the way they wanted to construct it. And so these people were very devoted to a specific way of life. They shared things in common. They had some of the most beautiful hand-painted things I'd ever seen, and they made their clothing, and just all these crazy things. I was like, wow, okay, the power of community is there, and I'd just been reading things about community. And so then I took a trip to Amsterdam and saw a bunch of to visit another friend, and she was working with a bunch of women who were in the red light district who were being sold in the windows. That was the ministry that she was involved with. And so I hop off the train on our way back, we're on our way back to the place where I'm going to be staying to put my bags, and she's all of a sudden like, oh, hold on. And so she walks forward a little bit to this woman who was clearly kind of jonesing, she was in full-on drug mode, like she was coming down from something in that moment, and was embarrassed that Rachel, my friend, had seen her. And I just look over and I see Rachel just say, I love you, look at me. And eventually the woman looks up at her and she says, I love you. And then we just go about our business again like nothing even happened. And then I realized, oh my gosh, my social location should be, I began to realize how beautiful living in the margins is, and how that really should be something that we can consider as more of a serious part to our own calls in life, to be willing to place ourselves in the margins, because I realize how much more natural those connections would be than if I'm just living in suburbia and coming down once a week or once every other week and giving in that way. So I had all these experiences, and then I come back, and then the big kicker was I go to work the first day that I've gotten back, and then all of a sudden, boom, in my email inbox, there's this email from the Emergent Cohort group that says, hey, come check out this new Catholic worker house in town called Cherith Brook. And I was like, interesting. I just literally got done reading a bunch of books about the Catholic worker movement and these different communities. And so, of course, I went, and upon going there, they gave me a book and cookies, and I was sold from that point on. And it took me about 1.5 years to finally get over some of the fears of the unknown that was existent there, because there's not very many role models. People my age, like we were like upper 20s. Me and a friend of mine, Micah, we were both doing this together, like talking about these things together. There wasn't very many people our age doing this sort of thing, whereas there was a lot of people climbing corporate ladders that we could look to as role models. And so, like, man, this is crazy if we decide to do this. And we realized that, right? And and it got to the point where we realized we either had to respond to God's call and end up becoming more alive, or choose to go this other route that we saw a bunch of other people going that we didn't necessarily feel called to, and then ultimately die spiritually inside slowly. And so out of that crisis moment that we were both having, we decided to move into this place to give it a shot. And we were originally going to start our own community, and we were just going to gain some insights from this one, which little did we know that they were just starting themselves. Like there weren't a lot of like communal practices set up yet. There was just like the hospitality piece was definitely set in place. And so we never left, and it's been 3 years.
All right, let's go ahead and stop just for now.
Mm-hmm.